Do you believe in climate change?
Yes.
You see, nowadays you just have to ask. But...
I mean, Clemson got hit by a hurricane. Western North Carolina got hit by a hurricane. It snowed in Charleston.
Yeah. And people will still tell you no. But anyway, do you know who discovered climate change?
I know some people who did discover climate change and who really need to.
That's a good answer. Well, most people who did some research on the topic would say this guy named John Tyndall, but that's not exactly true. So the actual first discoverer was a woman, but what's crazy is that she was almost completely erased from history.
Like climate change.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the story of Eunice Foote. This is the noise culprit. So before we get into today's episode, we need to briefly cover climate change. So climate change is defined by significant and lasting changes in global weather patterns, including severe heat waves, floods, and droughts. Primarily droughts. I've always said droughts. I know. I'm sorry, both of my parents are not from the Americas.
Neither am I.
You're slightly better adapted somehow. So, global weather patterns that are affected by climate change include severe heat waves, floods, droughts, and they're primarily caused by human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. So this is important because it threatens our environment, human health, and global stability. So it can obviously lead to rising temperatures, extreme weather events, sea level rise, habitat loss, and the disruption of ecosystems. This can impact food and water security, biodiversity, and economies worldwide.
The topic of the existence of climate change has been debated heavily throughout the years and what people should do about it. I personally think that if you actually look at science, it's almost impossible to say that climate change doesn't exist. I also think the majority of people nowadays do believe in it, but there are definitely some people who don't. The People's Climate Vote is the world's largest standalone public opinion survey on climate change, representing 87% of the world's population in 2024. This survey examines how people are experiencing the impacts of climate change and how they want world leaders to respond. More than half of people globally from the survey done in 2024 said that they were more worried about climate change now than they were in 2023. So I can only imagine that in 2025 we are more worried about it than we were in 2024. And 4 out of 5 people want their countries to strengthen commitments to address climate change.
So surveys like this one are able to provide decision makers with a reliable overview of how climate change impacts the world's population. So this survey showed that some of the expectations of decision makers from people include fast action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, offering increased protection from extreme weather events, protecting and restoring nature, closing gaps in climate education, and offering increased support for the world's most vulnerable. But wait, what's a greenhouse gas? So greenhouse gases are gases that trap heat in Earth's atmosphere. They let sunlight pass through the atmosphere, but they prevent the heat that the light brings from leaving the atmosphere. So some of the main greenhouse gases include water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons.
Cows are a very large producer
of methane.
Of methane, greenhouse gases. So why are they called greenhouse gases? They get their names from literal greenhouses, like the one that's full of windows and lets sunlight in. The sunlight creates warmth, and the greenhouses don't let that warmth go out. Greenhouse gases aren't necessarily bad or evil, but without them, we would literally die from the planet being too cold and we couldn't live. But too much of them isn't a good thing either. Coming back full circle to the warming of the planet and climate change. So, as you may have guessed now, we will be talking about the founder of climate science.
Yippee! So John Tyndall is often considered the father of climate science. In 1859, he conducted a series of experiments where he passed radiant heat through various gases, including carbon dioxide and water vapor, to demonstrate how these gases trapped heat in the Earth's atmosphere. So these experiments would later serve as the basis of our understanding of climate change. His groundbreaking findings are often cited as the beginning of the study of greenhouse gases. For over a century, John Tyndall was considered the discoverer of the greenhouse gas effect, and prominent scientific institutions that are dedicated to studying climate science are named after him. Super cool, right? Well, that's not the whole story.
In 2011, a man named Raymond Sorensen, who loved to collect old scientific journals and manuscripts, was skimming through a volume of the Annual of... Is that supposed to say the Annal?
No.
Anal? The Annual?
Yeah.
Interesting. The Annual of Scientific Discovery, published in 1857, and first read the name Eunice Foote. Let's talk a little bit about her life before we delve into her discovery. Eunice Newton was born in Goshen, I think that's how you say it, Connecticut, in 1819 to Isaac Newton, but not Isaac Newton, the physicist with the apple and all of that, although it is believed that they were like distant relatives. This Isaac, Eunice's father, was a cattle runner, and the family frequently moved to find better opportunities. By the time Eunice was 3 years old, the family had relocated to Bloomfield, New York.
In the 19th century, it was pretty uncommon for families in the economic bracket that Eunice's family was in to send their daughters to school. However, her parents strongly valued education, and they were determined to provide her with the best schooling available for girls at the time. So as she got older, Eunice attended the Troy Female Seminary, which is one of the first institutions in the United States to offer young women an education that is comparable to that of the college-educated male. So at the seminary, Eunice was taught both the typical subjects for women of the time, but also scientific courses and laboratory work. This opportunity gave her the knowledge that she would need to pursue her future scientific endeavors.
So, fun fact, as of 2025, there are no known photographs of the real Eunice Foote. Kind of wild. But in 1841, Eunice married Alicia Foote, who was an inventor and lawyer who would go on to become the U.S. Commissioner of Patents. After getting married, they moved to Seneca Falls in New York. Both Eunice and Alicia had a passion for science, technology, and the pair frequently collaborated in trying to answer the scientific questions and problems that interested them, including in 1856 when Eunice was working on her groundbreaking discovery. Alicia, oh my god, I keep wanting to say Eliza. Alicia was doing something similar. They were working together. The gist of it.
So now, to actually get into her discovery, Eunice used a simple setup of glass cylinders filled with different gases and put thermometers in them to test how various gases responded to the sunlight. Poot is trying to learn how to open doors currently. He's succeeding. But so she found that carbon dioxide, in particular, absorbed more heat more effectively than other gases. So the cylinder containing carbon dioxide warmed much more than those filled with regular air, and it also took much longer to cool down once they were removed from the sun. So her conclusion was groundbreaking. She suggested that gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor would trap heat in the atmosphere and be able to raise the temperature of the Earth.
I miss when, I know that, at the time that was considered groundbreaking.
But you couldn't do something like that now.
I know. I wish,
everything's been discovered.
I know! Everything has been discovered. Why is it so hard to make discoveries now? I wish that I could just be yeah, I'm making a conclusion about this, and then, bam, to discovery. But it doesn't work like that anymore.
Dude, if I could travel back in time with what I know now...
I mean, there's a lot of things we could do with that.
We could invent everything. We could become millionaires. We could go gamble and be right all the time.
I don't even know how to gamble.
Well, don't you just bet on stuff and be I bet that this is gonna...
I don't think that's how you actually gamble.
You could.
I think it's more I think that I can beat the card person, the broker,
Yeah. We could watch a bunch of horse races and I'll go back and bet on the horse.
Oh, are you talking about that type of betting?
I was talking about any time.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about Las Vegas and casinos where it's you play poker and blackjack and it's the hangover and all of the numbers are swirling around.
We could go back and invent that.
We could invent the numbers?
No, we could invent blackjack.
I think we could also invent numbers. We could be Julius Augustus Caesar and insert our names into the calendar.
Yes, they would praise us.
The month of Evatron.
Never mind.
Anywho, back to Eunice. Eunice concluded that an atmosphere of... Wait, a what?
It's a quote.
Oh.
So like old people words.
Bleh. Okay, so this is me attempting to speak Old English, and this is a quote from Eunice. An atmosphere of that gas would give to our Earth a high temperature, and as if some suppose, at one period of its history, the air had mixed with it a larger portion than... I'm not used to my, like...
No, keep going. You got it. You got it.
The flow is not flowing.
No.
It's fine. I'm gonna keep going. I'm starting over. An atmosphere of that gas would give to our Earth a high temperature, and as some suppose, at one period of its history the air had mixed with it a larger proportion than at present, an increased temperature must have necessarily resulted.
Yippee!
I don't know why that was such a difficult quote for my brain to comprehend. Anyways, basically, greenhouse gases are real. This was pivotal. And Eunice, not John, Eunice, was the first person to demonstrate that carbon dioxide is indeed a greenhouse gas. Her paper, titled Circumstances Affecting the Heat of the Sun's Rays, can still be found online, originally published in the American Journal of Science. So if you're watching on YouTube, here's a screenshot of one of those pages describing her experiments.
So later in the year of her experiment, which was 1856, both Eunice and her husband attended the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science to present their findings. However, while Elisha presented his own work, Eunice's paper was read out by a male colleague, Joseph Henry, who was the first director of the Smithsonian Institution. So it is uncertain whether this was because women were forbidden from presenting their own work, or if it would just be like simply weird of her to do so, since it was just really uncommon. So regardless, Eunice being unable to speak for herself was a strong indication of the prevailing prejudices of the scientific community at the time against women in their field. So Joseph Henry apparently hinted this when he introduced Eunice's work, saying that science was of no country and of no sex. The sphere of women embraces not only the beautiful and the useful, but the true. It was very silly of him.
Yeah. So, again, Jet mentioned just a few minutes ago, her paper was titled Circumstances Affecting the Heat of the Sun's Rays and was published in the American Journal of Science in 1856. So this was an incredible achievement for a female scientist of the 19th century, alongside Elisha's paper. This important piece of evidence in the debate that continues between historians and scientists today over the question of whether John Tyndall knew about Eunice's work when he conducted his own experiments 3 years later.
So, from reading John Tyndall's publishings, he seemed quite sure that he was the first person to make such a groundbreaking discovery. So he states, in quotes, "Nothing, so far as I am aware, has been published on the transmission of radiant heat through gaseous bodies." Well, now we know this wasn't true. Scholars are unsure if John Tyndall was just simply lying or unaware.
So this guy named Roland Jackson, who is John Tyndall's biographer, argues that there's no direct evidence that John was aware of Eunice's work. Roland Jackson argues that the scientific exchange between America and Europe was limited. Eunice's experiments were done in America, John's were done in England, so perhaps it was possible that news of her discovery did not reach England. And, like, that makes sense.
It does.
But I feel like 3 years, like, if it's, because what is it, Darwin and there was another guy where they, like, published, I forget who it is, but they published their findings in the same year and came to the same conclusion.
Right.
Same year makes sense.
Exactly.
3 years? 3 years is kind of a while. Especially if you're
long.
in the same field. I feel like, especially back then, they're like,
Right.
there weren't all that many climate scientists. Like, you had to run in the same circles.
Mm-hmm. And, like, reading that, I was like, yeah, okay, maybe. But there is this other side of the argument.
Oh?
So, argued by people such as Professor John Perlin, it's John was most likely aware of Eunice's experiments, and I do agree with what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
So the scientific community...
Wait, there were two Johns?
So this is like a present-day professor named John who is arguing
I see.
that other John is just obviously aware and
I see.
stealing information.
I see.
So the scientific communities at the time overlapped significantly because that's all they had, and he had access to the American Journal of Science. This is proven that he had access to the journal where her paper was published.
Well, buddy, can't defend you now. So sorry, I tried.
It gets even worse.
Oh, God.
So John Tyndall was an editor for the Philosophical Magazine, which is an English magazine, at the time that they reprinted a paper by Eunice Foote.
Oh, my God.
Her husband's paper. But his paper was directly next to hers. Like, if you open a book, his is on the left, hers is on the right. Like, they're right next to each other. So Professor Perlin, other John, believes that this shows that it would have been very unlikely for John to, see Alicia's paper and then not see Eunice's.
That's kind of insane.
Yeah.
That's also crazy how they figured that out, but also, like...
Yeah.
There's no defending you, buddy. So sorry.
No.
It was also well known that John Tyndall held biases against women's participation and capability in science, which further suggests the idea that he knew about Eunice and her work and chose not to credit her. We will likely never know for certain which of these arguments is true. However, I suppose that John still deserves at least some credit for his work. We have to give it to him. Mm-hmm. But Eunice's experiments were the one that showed carbon dioxide trapped more heat in comparison to other gases. She wasn't able to look into why this was the case and because she didn't have the needed resources. And John's experiment expanded on Eunice's with more advanced equipment because he was like a man and had established resources and was like an actual climate scientist, but whatever. And I guess he also isolated infrared radiation as the key factor in the greenhouse effect. But if you're going to do that, then say Eunice discovered greenhouse gases, and then John Tyndall discovered infrared radiation as the main factor. Don't say that bro discovered greenhouse gases.
He still would have been
Yes. Right. But regardless, I suppose giving John Tyndall some credit, his research provided a deeper understanding of how different gases like water vapor specifically interacted with radiant heat, which was a significant step forward for climate science.
But again, Eunice was clearly limited by the time period that she lived in, and I think if she lived later on, she would have been able to do so much more. So even though she was obviously brilliant, she wasn't able to become a professional scientist. They basically told her, no, you're funny, that's not happening. So she was forced to be an amateur scientist. And because of this, she lacked the resources that she needed to do experiments like John's. Not to mention, she lacked the credibility of her professionally trained peers. Also, being a woman only made these issues 10 times worse. She was either completely ignored or dismissed for either just being a woman or just not being a professional, but she couldn't be a professional because she was a woman, so...
Catch-22.
So yeah, if she had more researches, if she had
if she also had more researches.
Yeah, if she had more resources, she'd be able to do more researches, and have more education, and then people wouldn't outright dismiss her for being a woman. She probably would have been not lost to history for up until now.
Even though Eunice faced many challenges as a 19th century woman, by the time of her death in 1888, she filed several... I read that as she wore several pants. She filed several patents.
She wore a lot of hats, technically.
One of them was a type for filling for footwear that would prevent the squeaking of boots and shoes. Honestly, I feel like we still need that now.
We do.
People be squeaking everywhere.
Yeah.
And another was for a machine that would produce paper made with stronger fibers. She also contributed to a patent under her husband's name in 1842 for the first thermostatically controlled cooking stove. This was credited solely to him, in part because women who were married could not defend their patent rights. In between 1791 and 1864, thousands of patents were awarded, with only 70 being awarded to women. Eunice was awarded 2 of those 70.
It's pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
So she was also politically active. So Seneca Falls at the time was a center for progressive political activity, so she was able to meet many like well-known people and women who were active in this time.
I knew that name sounded familiar from somewhere.
I think it'll like click in your brain. So one of her connections allowed her husband to learn law. That connection was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Her father taught her husband law. So Eunice was able to attend this historic 1848 Seneca Falls Convention.
The Seneca Falls Convention! That's like one of those things in history that I'm like, yippee, exciting.
It's pretty great. So she was the fifth of 68 women to sign the Declaration of Sentiments. So the Declaration was written by Cady Stanton and other suffragists that demanded equality for women in all aspects of life.
Screw the Declaration of Independence. We got the Declaration of Sentiments. And as I was singing to myself in the shower last night from the lines of Hamilton, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. I'm not even joking. I was singing Hamilton in the shower last night. I was singing the Schuyler Sisters, and that is one of the lines in there. But yeah,
Foreshadowing.
So she was also part of a group that worked with Frederick Douglass, who was one of the 32 men to sign, along with her husband, Alicia. Honestly, with a name like Alicia, I feel like you have to sign it. Maybe it was a man's name at the time, but Alicia is girly pop.
Yes.
And because the men signed it, of course, you were able to publish it in the newspaper, but yippee for the girly pop men. Eunice's activism in the women's rights movements was just as important to her as her scientific endeavors. Women's suffrage was an early step towards gender equality in all aspects of life, but also including education and science.
So even though Eunice was very accomplished, she was still almost erased from history. This is a reminder that women have long played an important role in shaping science, despite the challenges they have faced in being acknowledged for their discoveries. So finally, Eunice's work is being recognized. Her discoveries played a significant role in understanding challenges like climate change and laying the groundwork for the generations that came after her. I also can't believe that there's still no pictures of her. Like, there's no images, there's nothing.
That's wild. Not even like a drawing?
No.
That's insane.
But we've got her patents, though.
Yay! Do we have her handwriting?
Yeah.
That's at least, like...
Yeah.
Imagine naming, like, I don't know, like, the Foote Climate Change Center. I just think Foote's a real fun name. Or Eunice, honestly.
Both.
Both
I feel
of
like
them.
they could do a fun play of words with like foot being like step path, like one small foot towards, you know. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Well,
wait, what is it? One step.
One small step for mankind. No, that's one big step.
What did the man on the moon say? Hold on. Neil Armstrong. What did he say on the moon?
Something.
One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind, one small foot for a woman, one giant leap for climate change. Yippee! The end!